morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of Pod Roku TV's World Edition. I greet you live from the All America city of Morrisville in the eighth largest state, North Carolina. We welcome you to the show where we talk about global affairs, turbulence in politics and economics, a looming recession, war in Ukraine, and innovation and how it's changing our world and the kinds of things we're dealing with as we're already well into May. We have Mother's Day coming up this weekend and a lot of really, really great things. But today, the breaking news is a jury has found Donald Trump, our former president, liable for sexual abuse and defamation against E. Jean Carroll, a writer. She accused Trump of assaulting her in the mid-90s, then inflicting more trauma by ridiculing her as a liar after she spoke out. The jurors in the civil trial awarded Carroll $5 million in damages, and it was another legal blow for the former president as he prepares a 2024 run. Tonight, he will appear at a town hall event on CNN in the United States. A controversial Republican governor is facing federal charges. Congressman George Santos, and that's another thing. And there was no breakthrough on the talks of the debt ceiling. That's all I really have for now. We are going to talk about Google and how it's making a press for AI, but we do have a guest today. So those are the topics of the day after our guest. I'm going to have Mark Lee run the show as I'm going to be getting some things ready, but we want to welcome our guest. Please come on in, Mark.
Yeah, see, Nick was having way too much fun. So I'm going to come in and bring in Russ Farnsworth and everything. You were talking about what was going on with Trump. Well, there's also things on the opposite side as well, because I understand that today, from my readings and things that I was hearing in Clubhouse, that today is the day that we might be hearing some indictments coming out around some of the situations that are involving Hunter Biden as well. So I think that there is supposed to be some announcements and some things that are going to be coming out today. I'd heard in the Clubhouse, I think 2 days ago, that there was Wednesday was supposed to be a day that we learn more about what is going on in that case. But one of the things that I have had the pleasure of talking to and had the pleasure of learning about is finding many great guests from RTIR as well as from podcast guests. And Russ Farnsworth I learned about because he oftentimes talks about and is very much aware of the fact that we oftentimes talk about the oligarchy in other parts of the world, like namely Russia and other parts of the world. But he has looked at the way that our media and our leadership is here as well. But I don't want to put words into the man's mouth. I'll let him speak for himself and let you learn more about what he is thinking about in that space. Because a lot of times, even when we think about Hollywood, we think about media, we think about a number of other things, there are those that wonder who is really in control. So, Russ, who's really in control, and what do our readers need to know about the leadership that is going on?
I think the oligarchs are pretty well in control of just about everything. They pretty much own most of the corporate media anyway. Luckily, we've still got some independent outlets where people can get some real information out there. But for the most part, when you turn on the news, or what they call the news, it's really propaganda from the people who own everything in our country, own the politicians, and they put their ideas out there, and that's kind of what becomes the national discourse.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. That becomes kind of the national discourse. And I know from a fact, it's one that has worked in the media, mostly in the nonprofit and community radio space, and now, of course, being involved in Pod TV and everything, that a lot of times there are serious monopolies that exist in the media. I know that if you look at the world of music and even the world of news media, a lot of it is controlled by certain entities, whether that's Live Nation, whether that's Clear Channel, whether that's Radio One, or a number of others. So I was just wondering, how has your research been going, and what have you been finding in the ways that people are finding to break that monopoly? Because I know, even as I mentioned, I do spend time in Clubhouse. I used to spend time in Discord, and it did seem that during the pandemic, more people were trying to put their own voices out there because they were tired of either the Fox or the CNN narrative, because one might be a little too far to the right, one might be a little too far to the left. But I was just wondering what your studies were showing you.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done serious studies into data and things like that, but certainly from what I see is that people we have this ability to get information out there and to counter what is in the corporate media and what comes out of politicians' mouths. It's never truth. So it's important that we inform ourselves as to what's going on and put real truth out there. And now social media really gives us an opportunity to do that. And I am a bit disappointed at times because if you go onto Facebook or Twitter, most of what you see is people just kind of regurgitating and amplifying those same messages from the corporate media and from politicians. And so we're kind of allowing that discourse to get into the areas that we actually have some control over and to take over that space as well. And so I really hope that everybody starts to consider the social media as a place for us to actually voice our own opinions and to counter what comes from the oligarchs, and not to just amplify what those oligarchs are saying on social media.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Who do you think? Because a lot of times when we talk about the oligarchs, that there are definitely some media players. We definitely have seen what Twitter is doing, and definitely we have seen how Elon Musk is taking over that space, and definitely had to deal with some stuff in the monetary area. And we do know that Murdoch is out there as well. So I'm imagining that those are two of the folks that you are thinking about when you're thinking about media oligarchs. Are there others out there that you are equally concerned about, and are those the ones that you are most concerned about?
I wouldn't say I'm most concerned about Murdoch and Elon Musk, although certainly I guess Murdoch would probably be one of the top concerns. A lot of them, you don't really know who they are. You don't know the names of people. They're kind of behind the scenes. For a long time, there's been criticism of General Electric because they own news outlets and they also own defense contractors. And so if there's ever talk about maybe going to war, those news outlets seem to be pretty favorable to it. And is that because it's a good idea for our country, or is it because it's a good idea for their profits? And you have to wonder about that. So yeah, a lot of these oligarchs, you really don't know who they are. They're not common household names. They're people who are on some boards and really operate behind the scenes.
How much do you think that rule of the media and the way that the media is governed and now is playing into the conversation around dissent? Because there is a lot of division. A lot of people are talking about the division, whether it's on racial lines, whether it's on sexual lines, whether it's on a number of other lines that exist, even the rural versus urban lines and everything. But how much do you think that the media is playing a part in those divisions?
I think they play a great deal in it. I think that the oligarchy loves for we the people to always be in conflict and never coming together to solve real issues. To me, the real issues of our country are getting money out of politics, having stronger ethics rules for our politicians, and making sure that we have election integrity so that we can really hold our politicians accountable. And if we aren't doing those things, or if we haven't achieved those things, anything else we're doing is not really doing much for us, because those things, the corruption and the money, taint everything that goes on in government. So as long as that's there and we're allowing it to remain there, anything that comes out of government is going to be a half measure. It's going to be something that's not the right policy that we actually need.
Yeah, that makes sense. When did you first become interested in both politics and in media in general? Was you the one, like I know I was involved in my newspaper actually before high school, like junior high, and some number of other papers at times as well. But when did you first become involved in interest in government and media?
I was pretty young, and mostly, I would just watch news with my parents, and I found it pretty interesting. But I'd say probably starting at the age around 9 or 10, and I've always been independent. My experience watching those news programs was that one day Republicans were in the hot seat for some scandal, and the next day it was Democrats, and it just seemed like they were both bad and not really doing the right thing for our country. And so I've always had an independent mindset when it comes to that. And for the media, I guess I was about 22 21. Well, no, I think I was about 20 when I just got so fed up with the media, just because everything seemed like it was sugar coated and didn't seem to be telling the full story on things. And I kind of tuned out for a while, and I actually stopped voting for a while, for a couple of years. And then I ended up working for a guy who would always play NPR in his van when we would be driving out to some job site, and I would hear that the news was different there, and then they seemed to be talking a little bit more about reality. On these NPR shows, they were talking about things like female genital mutilation, and you don't really hear that a lot on the mainstream news. It's not something that they really like to talk about. It doesn't do the oligarchs any benefit, to report on stories like that, so they just don't really talk about it. And it also might make people a little less interested in spending money on themselves and maybe sending money to some of these places where there's female genital mutilation going on to try to end that practice. And so I think that the oligarchs are really tailoring the news to keep people, just kind of going along and not really making waves or challenging things, and not getting the information that's going to make them want to stop and reflect about what's really important in life and how maybe we need to make some changes here.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to bring in some of the other panelists as well. I'm sure they've got some questions and thoughts for you and all in that space. But before I get to that, I also saw that you have inventor on your title as well. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what the invention is and where we can also hear some of your political commentator, because definitely people are watching. They're going like, he's a political commentator and an inventor, and are probably wondering about both of those. So if you could share a little bit about those parts of your life as well.
Sure. Yeah. In my 20s, I came up, mentally with the water saving idea. And then several years ago, I started working toward actually building it. And I did have a working prototype for a moment. And then I ended up in a crazy situation where I was kind of being stalked when I was living off in the wilderness, off the grid, and ended up having my home burned down. And I lost that working prototype. So now I've kind of got to start all over. But it is an exciting idea, and it's something super important, especially here in California. We're in a major drought. So I'm hoping that I can pick this up and continue moving it forward. And what was the other question?
But where can we hear your political commentating? Because you definitely also have missed into that you are a political commentator as well.
Yes. Well, I created a website called russandwatson.com. Watson is my big, lovable guard dog. So I created a website that kind of talks about our experiences there in Siskiyou County. And I also have a page that has a link to all my political cartoons, as well as a link to my blog. And even the music and filmmaking that I've done usually has a political theme to it all. So there's links to some of those projects as well.
So it's about political cartoonists, because definitely there was a time that I remember political cartoonists as being very much a avid part of the paper, whether that was Doonesbury or Bloom County or a number of other things. And I don't know that it is as strong as it used to be. But then again, I've not been reading the newspaper as much as I used to in the sense of the physical copy. I definitely read online. But I was wondering your thoughts as to the nature of political cartoons in the 21st century.
Yeah, political cartoons can be very powerful because you can sort of express a really big idea, usually just with one simple image, in a few words. So when you have a really good political idea, it can certainly be powerful. And I listened to a show called The Bradcast, and there's a website for that called bradblog.com. And they do political cartoons every Sunday, and those are excellent. So I always go there every Sunday and look at their political cartoons and then share them across social media. They, on that broadcast or blog, they really focus on election integrity, which I kind of mentioned before is one of the issues that I think is most important. And they also focus a great deal on climate change. So there's a lot of good information there about those two topics, which I think are, two of the top most important things that we've got ahead of us.
Yeah. What do you think about Since you're a commentator, real quickly, what is your thought about Trump and the CNN got a town hall tonight? Do you think the Democrats are? Do you think he can run again, even though his recent conviction? And do you think the Democrats are making a mistake on focusing too much on Trump?
Well, I think he can run again, and it looks like he's going to. I don't see him really backing out, at least not yet. So I think he's going to try to keep pushing forward. I don't know if he can be successful. I apparently new polling has come out showing that he would beat Biden in a head-to-head. A lot of people are hoping that after a primary, if he goes through some challenges, Trump, if he goes through some challenges in a primary, that he may come out a little bruised, and that will change that polling data. Yeah, I'm not really sure about that. It's a pretty big question, and the thing about Trump is, we've never really seen his type before. I mean, we're used to him now after the past few years, but there's no real political wisdom that always applies to him.
Yeah.
Very true. Hey, Nick brought up an interesting point, and Nick, if you should share that information again about the nature of the ownership of the media, because I did see what you strolled across.
Yeah, this is kind of a startling statistic. You can go research and fact check it. 90% of the U.S. media is owned by 5 companies today. In 1970, it was 50 companies. So what we have is a group of people that when you listen to media, you're being fed by basically 5 companies. The rest of the companies, they're strangled and starved out. And you're right, Russ, social media can make a change in this. But I can tell you, after doing this for a couple of years with Mark, we tend to get strangled on even social media. In other words, to the extent you want, and it's for benign stuff. We're not even discussing things. It's just that the hatred for alternative media is just unparalleled in this country. In terms of Trump being on CNN, this is a problem I have with CNN in general. He shouldn't even be on CNN. Really. Yeah. Lee, you should be on CNN tonight. Why are you promoting Trump CNN? They did this mistake last time. They're chasing ratings. They're chasing controversy. They're chasing stuff. CNN should not even cover Trump. He should be a non-entity.
Well, I think it helps. It helps him because it just helps
Trump. It helps Trump. It doesn't matter. Trump is right. Any publicity is good publicity. If you want to get rid of Trump, stop covering him. Period. The end. But
make him irrelevant.
Wants to elect Trump. It's horrible. They shouldn't even cover it.
Nick, the 90%, does that include podcasts that are streamed online?
No, I'm not really sure. You can go look this up. In other words, the 90% of USA.
I think that's mainstream media would be my guess.
I think
so, Mark.
What media you consume today, chances are anything that you read, see, it's going to be 5, and they showed it, 5 large companies owning a whole spider network of various other media outlets. So almost everything you consume. And the real problem is they set the agenda. For example, one agenda is Social Security is going bankrupt next decade. It is completely off the radar for media. Another agenda, Medicare goes bankrupt this decade, off the agenda because politicians don't benefit it. Another thing is Big Pharma puts ads all the time. And so no one counters the fact that you're paying for those ads. Completely wiped out. So what the real problem you have with media is they set the agenda for the American public. The United States debt, okay, take all the homes in America. The mortgages total 11.2 trillion. The national debt is 31 trillion. They don't tell people how really bad it is here in terms of our financial situation because it doesn't benefit politicians, it doesn't benefit the media. So it's just ignored and swept under the rug.
Russ, really quickly, as I'm thinking about it,
that's my diatribe.
Actually, Nick kind of alluded to it. There has been a real push, and I'd love to hear Jatovi's thoughts about this as well, with the powers in the social media space and how they oftentimes will dictate the conversations as well. And I don't care whether that's Rumble or Facebook or a number of others. And if you say something that they deem to be slightly controversial, they will pull you. Sometimes they'll ban you. Sometimes they'll just totally eradicate you, as Nick knows, because they've definitely eradicated some accounts that he has had and all in that space. So what is your advice or your thoughts when you're seeing that going on in kind of the court of public opinion, because social media is more of a public opinion than the mainstream media is, but they are definitely also ruled by folks that are in control in one form or fashion.
Yeah, cancel culture is a little bit of a dangerous thing to play with when we talk about limiting people's speech. People don't want to hear certain things, and they want to have voices silenced if they think someone is saying something that's kind of dangerous. And I can understand that sentiment, but also those things end up coming around and having a negative unintended consequence. So I've been canceled from Twitter and Facebook on various occasions, and oftentimes not for violating any of their rules. Sometimes just using sarcasm on Facebook can get you, put in jail there for a few days. So I'll start to allow silencing people, it's going to end up affecting us as well. And as we start to attempt to try to take on the power in this country, with them owning and controlling everything and controlling all of these social networks, they can then start to limit our speech and start to prevent people from really collaborating and sharing ideas about how to truly fix the country and have major reform. And the thing about the 5 companies who own all the media in the country, the fact that it's such a small number is shocking and alarming. But what's even more important than that is they're all pretty much all the same class of people, and they all have the same interests for the most part. And they're interests that are very, very different than ours. They don't have to worry about how they're going to send their kids to college, or whether they're going to have enough money for retirement, or how they're going to afford a big surgery. They've got plenty of money for all that, and none of that is any kind of concern for them. And so the things that are most of a concern for people like all of us together, really aren't a concern for the people who deliver our news and control everything in our government and are running things. And that's the real problem. And that's why our voices on social media are very, very important.
And one of the things I was curious about, and I'm going to bring Sasha into the conversation as well, is when you talk about the media and you talk about these power brokers, you deliberately use the word, and I noticed that, oligarchy. And I know a lot of times when people think of oligarchy lately, they think of Russia and what Putin is doing. So how similar do you see, Russ, our oligarchy to that of the Russian oligarchy? And I'm sure based on your answer, Sasha may have some thoughts as well, but how similar are these oligarchies in your mind and everything in that way?
I think they're pretty similar. I think they wield a lot of power, and they pretty much are pulling all the strings behind the scenes. And so, yeah, I think they're really pretty much controlling everything. And so whenever I see someone who's trying to really promote the status quo and not have big changes in the country, that just immediately to me is suspicious that, they're trying to keep the oligarchy in control of things and not trying to allow people to express opinions that might challenge their power.
Yeah. Lee, I saw you had a comment, as did Dan. So any questions or thoughts that you have based on what Russ is saying?
No, Russ brought up an interesting question before in terms of how come no one's talking about female genital mutilation anymore? Years ago, that was the thing to talk about. There's a horrible practice and it's very dangerous to women. I think you can't speak about that and having children being transitioned to other sexes at the same time. That's what I think what's going on. Your thoughts, Russ? Argetovi also?
Yeah, I know that a lot of people who have this gender dysphoria can get into a lot of self-harm, and that's very dangerous too. So it's a tricky situation, and I would hope that parents and doctors would be able to determine if their child or a child is really having an issue with this, or if they're just kind of going through a phase. And what we're seeing is that maybe some parents sort of catered to their child's desire at the time to transition their body, and then that child later decided that it wasn't what they really wanted, and then that's a huge tragedy. So I think it would be wrong to end the practice of gender transitioning, because I think it does help a certain group of people, but we just have to be very careful about whether we transition someone, especially, a young person like that who really can't make decisions about themselves with a great deal of certainty and knowledge and experience. At that age, it's very difficult. But like I say, the self-harm can be equally or even more damaging than trying to transition. So I would disagree with trying to ban it altogether.
I would say that we have to also be educated when we discuss that that mutilation or this child mutilation stuff is not dealing with the trans community. That's not what that's lazy. That is very insulting to the trans community. You're saying that anybody who is trying to figure themselves out is actually just mutilating themselves, and they should never. We have to educate and steer ourselves away from trying to always demean people or demean things that we disagree with. And speaking of the education piece, the gender dysphoria thing, that is only a particular amount of the trans community that experience that gender dysphoria. However, that's not a mental condition. Dysphoria is a normal thing that other individuals feel. All it is just a state of uncomfortability. So really, that dysphoria, you could have job dysphoria. You could have dysphoria in your family. I mean, you could have dysphoria being the color that you are. Dysphoria is just a generalized term. So when we start to talk about the trans community, we have to be cognizant of how we talk about that. And yeah, the idea of banning the transition and actually denying people the services that they need because the kids are trying to figure themselves out. We also have to understand that any transition truthfully doesn't begin to the age of about 15 or 16. So when we're talking about, kids transitioning, it's not really that they are transitioning at the age of 5 or the age of 6, which people are making it out to be. So it's about education, and it's about how we express ourselves. And then on top of that, when people try and bring up the idea that, people still commit suicide after transitioning, you have to understand the high suicide rate isn't because they now they don't feel comfortable now being the gender that they transitioned into. The high suicide rate is because of us. When we sit here and demean and attack, calling those who transition into if you call transgender women are still being abused at a high rate because men are still trying to sexualize women the same way they sexualize cisgender women. And then on top of that, when they find out that they're not a cisgender woman, they get upset and then begin to abuse those women even more so. So you have that high suicide rate going even higher. Same thing with men who just transitioned or transgender men. When you don't feel comfortable in who you are, and then you finally believe that you are who you're supposed to be, but then you're told by society that you're evil, a deviant, you should just kill yourself. What do you think is going to happen when the whole world is telling you should die? You go and commit suicide. That is why the suicide rate is high in the transgender community. So what we should do, again, it all falls back to education and being cognizant of the words that we use. Talking about gender mutilation, that is not anything to do with the transgender community.
It's interesting. This topic has been this issue's been with us for a very long time. It's not something new. It's just been made hyper present by the political agenda at this point. These things were always happening, and they're normally happening behind the scenes, quietly, privately, between their families and their physicians. And it's been the politicization of it may actually have not helped the transgender community, because most of it was done quietly and privately, and those exceptions were always handled in a private way. So it's interesting. I don't think so here's my thinking. I don't think we're going to change anybody's mind about this topic. They either believe one way or another, or the other way or another about it from a political position. I do urge compassion and concern, because people who have this issue are suffering. I do think it is a mental illness, and it has to be dealt with one way or the other through counseling and or transitioning, whatever way people decide to do it. But it's a lifetime struggle. It's not just one and done, Jacoby. It's something you have to deal with your entire life. It's like every other thing that we have to deal with.
So Dan, the one thing that I will agree with you on is that it has become politicized. Outside of that, I disagree with most of what you said. The big reason is it's not a mental condition to try and figure out who you are. It's just not. We all go through it. I didn't fall in love with a woman. It's not a mental issue for me to do that. It's not a mental issue for a man to fall in love with another man, or a woman to fall in love with another woman. What the problem is we haven't normalized this, even though it has been normal for centuries. Heck, Bugs Bunny was dressing in drag for decades, but none of us here dress in drag. Yet we've watched Bugs Bunny. Men used to play the parts of women in every single theatrical performance, yet we didn't complain about that. Orgies, everything, all this other craziness. Yes, I bring up orgies because men and men were having sex, women and women were having sex. In porno today, hate to point it out, but even in porno, men, you could count how many men watch women and women have sex. So we have to normalize that these things, a transgender woman is natural. It's okay.
Well, let's first of all, let's make it clear that
we have to normalize these things.
Sexual deviance is sexual deviance. It just is. Immorality is immorality. It just is. Because of God's law. You can't change God's law.
Who's God?
Just
who's
because,
God?
That's
God?
the other problem you have.
Dan, who's God?
You don't believe in God. You
Dan,
don't have a
who's
belief.
God?
Jesus Christ. And
well, that's one.
Elevate.
That's one religion.
No,
how many other religions are out there?
Well, okay. Islam believes in the same thing.
How many religions
Catholics
are
believe
out there?
the same thing.
Pagans. How many pagans? What
I
about
don't know how
Satanists?
many pagans or Satanists?
So, in other words,
Satanists
Dan,
actually
point
believe there
wrong.
is a Jesus Christ. They just believe he's on the wrong side of the
You are
argument.
saying one religion. You are pointing to one religion.
Yeah,
there
actually,
are multiple religions.
I am pointing to one religion.
One religion. There are multiple
exactly.
religions.
Well, but there is only one God.
You cannot
see.
say that one
God's
religion
laws-
dominates everything.
God's laws are eternal.
It's
and
not
they are,
God's law. That's one
yeah,
religion.
it is part
what
of
if,
God's
what
law.
if I'm an atheist?
See, that's the problem.
So I must follow your religion?
Jacoby, here's the thing. You have no morals because you don't have a moral
I
compass.
have no morals. Why? Because I don't believe the same thing you do?
You don't know because you don't believe that morals.
So you
are,
have no clue about me, but yet you're saying that
well, I
have
hear
no
what you're
clue.
saying, Jacoby, and I understand.
saying
Okay.
But
So
Dan,
here's the thing.
Dan, stop.
Dan, you can be moral and not be religious.
Well,
Thank
it's
you.
possible, but there should be tolerance for people who have differences. I agree with that. So I'm agreeing with you with respect to that because they have to work through their issues. It's their thing. They have to decide, and it is their choice. They have to decide. People have to live with the consequences of their choices. It's how the world works. It's how life works. But you cannot legitimize immorality by making. I mean, people can choose to be immoral if they want to be immoral because they don't think they're being immoral, like you said.
The thing is, Dan.
Hold on a second. Dan,
It's a very subjective term.
Dan, aren't you making a assumption? Like I said, well, one, they say that one of the most segregated hours, even in the 21st century, is unfortunately those hours around Sunday morning and even some around Wednesday when we have Bible study and all in that space, because there is a lot of division, even in terms of the ways that churches go and all in that space. There was those statements that were made in the 70s, and I would argue, unfortunately, they're still true in the 21st century. And, you know, I don't know, as far as I know, I think that Jacoby is involved in a church and everything, but I don't know what his church, what his Sunday mornings are like and all in that space. So you are making an assumption, and you know what they say about assumptions.
Here's a question. Dan, do you eat bacon?
Yeah, I eat bacon.
You're immoral. According to your religion, you're immoral.
Not my religion.
Jacoby has a point, Dan. It's in the Bible.
Yeah, but Jesus Christ
It's
fulfilled
in
the
the
law.
Bible. Which one are you going to say is
Jesus
right?
Christ fulfilled the law of Moses and said that it was no longer unclean. That's
And
what
the
Jesus
pig,
Christ
though it has a divided hoof, does not
Is this Leviticus?
does not chew the.
Well, you're talking about the Old Testament, and again, Jesus
the
Christ.
Old Testament. The Old
Don't
Testament.
you remember? Don't
In
you
the
remember
New Testament, do
that
you
Paul
think it
had
says
a
that
vision
women
that Jesus Christ appeared to
can
him?
women hold positions of power in the New Testament? The answer is incorrect. No, according to Timothy
Actually-
2:11, women cannot hold power above men. So utilizing the Bible as your moral, immoral, I'm right, you're wrong, doesn't work.
Actually, Jacoby,
Women can't hold positions of power according to Timothy 2:11. That's in the New Testament. That's according to the Bible that you just want to use as your
yeah,
argument.
but that was Paul.
Timothy 2:11.
Well, hold on a second. I want to get
Is
back
this a
to
Bible class?
Hold on a second. Let's get back to the yes, because one of the questions I had for him is not so much about religion, but it's about the media. So, Russ, one of the things I was curious about is how do you think that the media is doing? Because when I came up in and wanted to be a journalist, part of the reason I wanted to be a journalist was my folks had that radio station that I've alluded to several times and everything. But I also saw what was going on with Watergate. I was actually a fan of Woodward and Bernstein and their coverage of Watergate and a number of other things. And that's kind of what got me interested in what is considered investigative journalism. I don't know that there is enough investigative journalism out there now. A lot of it seems to be show reporting, and that's what I consider it. It's kind of like that Geraldo kind of reporting and a number of others that I could name as well. But what is your thoughts about the state of investigative journalism, and is it not being fair to either side? Because y'all have heard me say both the left and the right, and I think that investigative journalism could be doing a better job, including investigating some things that need to be investigated that are not investigated to Lee's point, both globally and locally and even nationally. But Russ, you're the guest, so I'd love to hear your thoughts as to how you feel the investigative journalism is doing as you are a political commentator.
Yeah, I definitely agree that we need a lot more of it. And I don't know how many really great journalists there are out there, but I have discovered a few. Greg Palast is an amazing journalist. I've read all of his books, and I don't know if he's working on any books in the future now. He seems to just be putting out, occasional dispatches on his website. But he does some great investigations and great reporting, and he's been on it for a long time. The Lever is I think sort of a new publication that's out with a journalist named David Sroda, who's been around for a long time. I've found their reporting to be really good recently, so that's another one. People need to find these outlets and start getting their information from them. I think anytime you are getting your news from a source that has commercials in it, especially if they're commercials from big oil, big pharma, Wall Street banks, and all of those players, you're only going to be getting propaganda. And so you really have to look at smaller outlets that don't have any advertising, or at least don't have corporate sponsors, and that are those huge corporations, because that's what really, really taints the news. And when we talk about the LGBTQ issues, a lot of these people like Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and some of the others that make a lot of noise about those topics, it seems very mean-spirited to me. I don't know really what they're trying to accomplish. I don't think we're ever going to be back to having just two genders again, and everybody being conforming to that and not wanting to express who they are. I think we're beyond that now. People need to live as their open and true selves. And all of us who are cis people, I mean, should consider ourselves just to be very lucky that, our lifestyle is accepted and is considered normal in society. And so we shouldn't be mean-spirited about those people who don't find themselves within our group. We should be trying to make them, be comfortable and enjoy being who they are.
Hey, Russ.
Can I just add one point? Russ, we should never be mean-spirited. And so to Toby's point, we never be evil towards people who live a different life than us. 100%, I agree with that. But from a scientific standpoint, biology, putting the word gender aside, besides the X and Y chromosomes, is there any other combination?
There's not. Well, actually, there may be. I'm certainly not any kind of expert on that. But there are people born with multiple sets of genitalia. They might have both female.
But that's such a subset. That's like someone born without a thumb. You still say you have, 4 fingers and a thumb for the average person.
But, then what does a doctor write down on the birth certificate for the sex of that child? It's an infant.
I understand. That's exception, though. I got that.
It's minutes old, and visibly, you really can't tell what the sex of the child is. And
There's a word for that. I don't remember. You're right. There is a word for that.
So if a doctor, gives, births this baby, writes down male on the birth certificate, but then they end up having female attributes, they look female, they believe they're female, then they have to use a men's room for the rest of their life because the doctor couldn't quite get it right. I think it's really, if we start messing with these things and trying to really engineer it for a certain outcome that conforms to that 2-gender policy, it's just not workable. And when they tried to have bathroom bans in certain places, you had a lot of cis people getting accused of being trans. And I can't imagine how that would feel to somebody. So whether it's right or not isn't even really a concern. It's whether is something actually workable as a policy within our society. And does it violate people's rights, or does it allow people to be safer and have more rights? Those are the issues that we need to look at and address those concerns.
And one of the problems that came about because of that bathroom bill was based off of hyperbolic fear tactics, which were stressing, men are going into women's bathrooms, but that really wasn't what was going on. It was exactly what Russ was talking about. I mean, just trying to make it workable if you identify as female, utilizing the female bathroom is correct for you, and it becomes uncomfortable and unworkable for that individual. That's another. I mean, it's just the way our society is growing and adapting and learning.
One thing people don't understand about the HB2 bathroom bill in North Carolina, though, is that it actually initiated when Charlotte was told to not do it, because in North Carolina, no city can do anything without the permission of the General Assembly. And so there was a law that the Constitution of North Carolina doesn't really spell it out, but the law basically is that you go into a bathroom. If you're a man, you go into a man's bathroom, women in women's bathroom. Well, Charlotte put an ordinance out there and basically said you can go in the bathroom of your choice, not on your birth certificate. Now, what HB2 did, though, however, the General Assembly, I agree with Jatovi, instead of striking down the ordinance, they incorporated so many things in there that were against LGBTQs, also just general like minimum wages and all kinds of things they put in there. And that's what actually cost the state billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. But I will say this, that, there's now efforts in the Republican General Assembly. It's called the anti-trans bill. And basically, getting more into sports and athletics and things like that. But I think that these social issues get away. I mean, my criticism as a moderate Democrat, to be very honest with you, is I think the Democratic Party of North Carolina has become a party that's really dictated by more the liberal wing of the party. And these issues of social issues aren't selling well in the rural areas of the state. And I think this.
Well,
hold on a second. I was actually going to bring up something that is a news story to Steve. What is your thoughts about this push?
Mark, before
Go
you
ahead.
jump to that, because I want to jump on what Steve is saying real quick, because
Right.
speaking about North Carolina,
That's
North
right.
Carolina has a super majority at GOP in North Carolina. It's always been heavily dominant Republican in the General Assembly, and so Charlotte is a very progressive city, as you well know. Same thing as Durham, same thing as the areas, and historically speaking, the rural areas anywhere in the country usually turn out to be heavily red and heavily Republican. So regardless, whatever plays in Charlotte is not going to play well in the heavily red rural areas anywhere. Be it a
Yeah, but that's exactly my point. That's exactly my point. I'm not
But
saying
how-
I don't agree. Yeah,
but the thing
this
the
year in the
thing is-
Council of State, except for Josh Stein, every person on the Democrat is from, well, he's from Chapel Hill, an urban area. And then every other Democrat running for a Council of State is from Mecklenburg County.
how
And-
much does that deal with the gerrymandering that is going on in the Republican General Assembly, who just overturned, for example, they just overturned the court decision that was supposed to redraw the maps in North Carolina to make it more even based, but then they took all that away. That just happened 2 years ago when they that was agreed with at the courts level in North Carolina. But this year, because of the whole switch and being that supermajority was taken away, and they're redrawing the maps again to actually pare down the Democrat counties. So it's harder to say that we have to play well in the rural areas and give up our rights, being giving up rights of women, because that's on the board right now. They just passed the bill, that 12-week ban bill, which was ridiculous. They're still pushing in some of the other things. I mean, coming from CPAC was talking about the genocide of the trans community, and so that's being funneled through the GOP. How much do you have to play there?
Well,
Yeah,
and
But,
Steve-
but at the end of the day, I mean, look, I totally agree with you. But the fact of the matter is, what I'm saying today, and I'm saying this as a Democrat, that they will not win U.S. Senate seats. They will not win. They could lose the governorship. They will not take back any seats in legislature if they continue to argue only with the issues of social issues and choice. They're not going to win. And I don't care how many protests, how many rallies you have. It comes down to what to want. It's the secret sauce. You have to dance the dance. When you're going into a rural area, talk about investments in infrastructure, jobs. But our Democratic Party doesn't do that. And it's going to happen all over again. The last two Democrats that won statewide offices is Elaine Marshall. She's 77 years old. Josh Stein won by 10,000 votes. The Republicans have taken over the state treasurer, the state insurance commissioner, the agricultural commissioner, the state superintendent of public construction. We've only won one U.S. Senate seat in the last 20 years, John Edwards and Kay Hagan. So obviously, what the Democrats are doing in North Carolina is not working. And
I know they just changed over but they just changed over the head of the Democrat Party in North Carolina.
Yeah, well, let's see what she does. She's got 5 months.
On top of that, how much do you think plays into, again, the gerrymandering, the voter ID bill that they're trying to push through? A lot of the actual pushback that is taking away the Democrat vote itself. So a lot of it isn't. We cannot blame everything on what the Democrats are doing, because even when they go into these rural areas and talk about these issues of these money issues and the business issues and so on and so forth, how is that actually playing? Because with our society being so team oriented, I'm never going to vote Republican because of, I'm never going to vote Democrat because of. We're so tribalistic at this moment. How far do you have to go to get a vote in a rural area as a Democrat when you go up against that tribal view?
But Jacoby and Steve, the question I have, because apparently the latest tactic in this article that I read, I think it was yesterday, is that the current governor is going into this notion of trying to flip the Republican votes because of that supermajority. So he's actually vetoing that bill that you just referenced, the 12-week vote and all that. But he's trying to get Tricia Cotham, who's just recently switched, to flip her vote. And I think he's targeting 5 or 6 other people that he thinks are actually more in that pro-life kind of attitude and that he can get them to flip one way or the other. But I was just wondering, do you think that that strategy, or pro-choice, I should say, do you think that that strategy will work and everything? Because he has definitely said that he is going to veto it at a public rally, which is Steve's point. He's going to do this at a public rally this weekend, and he's going to try to campaign and lobby these folks to flip their vote, some that he think were soft on their vote.
I mean, the women's rights issue does play, and that's the only one that really plays in the rural, not even the rural areas, but the suburban areas right now. And that is garnering a lot. It has garnered a lot of support. The sad thing is, with that veto that he's going to push through, just like with the gun bill that the supermajority overruled him on, they're going to do the same thing with the abortion ban. And I think Cotham, who you're talking about, was the senator out of North Carolina who just changed from Democrat to Republican.
Right.
And she did that because she was going to get the money and the financing. She did it basically monetary reasons. She may switch. She may not. I mean, we don't know. But either way, it's going to get pushed through. That's the sad thing. And that issue is a winning issue and can help. Because I know right now the governor that they're trying to put in from the Republican side, Mark Ronson, he's ridiculous. He's the black guy racists pull up to say, hey, well, this black guy said it.
Yeah, definitely.
Really, that's how it
I'm not
works.
familiar with them. Can you just give me one example? What's ridiculous about him? I have no idea who this guy is.
Absolutely great.
So you blame it on. That's such a funny statement.
No, I don't know. He has no experience to be governor, though. He's actually never held a job, I don't think. He's been bankrupt 3 times. He doesn't have any experience. He made one
Sounds
speech.
like Biden.
No, but he has no. I mean, he made one speech in Greensboro City Council meeting that went viral and became a lieutenant governor. Now he wants to be governor. I mean, I don't care if you're a Republican, but you got to have some experience to be the chief executive of the 8th
Yeah,
largest
you
state.
think. Yeah, you think,
Yeah.
right?
But he's leading in the polls right now against Josh Stein. So in a head-to-head
Wow.
race right now, he would be the governor. So Josh Stein better. I heard right now that they're actually looking to see whether Stein would be the right guy to run. But right now, if the election were held today, Mark Robinson would defeat Josh Stein.
And that's sad.
That is sad. Hey, Russ, what are your thoughts? One of the things I was going to ask, and we get ready to wind down and everything, is we did see a lot of dissenting voices that were out there in social media, but sometimes those voices were a little bit too far to the extreme, because we definitely saw some anti-vaxxers and some other ones that were very passionate about what they were saying, and they weren't always as concerned as they probably could be about the facts and everything. So is there that danger as well, that sometimes people can be a little bit overzealous in when they are being their own version of the media? So I just wondered your thoughts as a commentator, if you're ever concerned about some groups, because I've gone to clubs where they literally are squashing people that are of a dissenting view, even if their view isn't necessarily the quote unquote correct view, or the view that is backed by facts.
Correct view?
You bring up a really, really good point with that. People can have a lot of crazy ideas. And as far as the vaccine goes, there are a lot of problems with the vaccine. I'm no expert about it, but there's also a lot of, untrue things said about it. And, I don't blame anybody for not trusting it. I don't blame anybody for not trusting Big Pharma. But some of the information that was coming out was just really crazy, that it's going to change your DNA, or that they're going to put some tracker in you using this vaccine. Those kinds of things were just really not helping anything. All that is counterproductive. So you do bring up a great point with that. There's a sort of phenomenon that there's a great example of this phenomenon, and it probably has a name, and I don't know the name of it, but basically they would have this huge bull at a county fair and invite people to come in and guess how big this bull was. And some people would say, that bull is enormous. It's got to be at least 300 pounds. And then other people would say, that bull is enormous. It's got to be at least 16,000 pounds. Well, once 1,000 people come together and guess on it, they end up guessing it within a pound of its actual weight, which is pretty amazing. And so that gives me a lot of hope and optimism that if we all get involved in this thing and try to come up with solutions, that in the end, we're going to arrive at the right place, even if we've got wings of factions that are way, way out there. I believe that the majority of us have, know the right way to go, and that when everything is kind of averaged together, that hopefully we're going to end up in the right place. But we have to have that big conversation that includes everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
Hey, Russ,
I agree.
really quickly before I toss it to Steve, and he may toss it to Sasha as well, but how can folks reach you? How can they read your works? Is there any films that you're currently working? So if you'll tell folks how they can reach you, you've been a great guest, and hopefully we'll have you come back again in the near future.
Yeah, I would love to be back. Yeah, the website that I've got going is russandwatson.com, RUSSANDWATSON. So it's just the kind of the story of that me and my dog have been going through the past few years. And then I've also put, like I say, links to my political blog and cartooning and other things, projects that I've been working on there. So yeah, if anybody wants to follow up, that would be the website to go to. And if I can make one point, we've talked a lot about some great subjects and topics in this show. And what I want everybody, all your audience to understand is that when we talk about things like getting money out of politics and election integrity and ethics rules for our politicians, those are not policies. Those are underlying issues. And so whenever a politician comes up with a policy, if we don't have those underlying issues figured out, then that policy is always going to be bad. And that's why, any law that comes out, it's always bad because the foundation is rotted and corrupt. And so we have to fix that foundation, make sure those corrupting influences aren't present. And then our policies will actually be good because there's nothing that's going to taint them.
Yeah. Definitely agree with you. Steve, toss it to you, and if you want to toss it to Sasha for a quick thing, that's cool too.
Yeah, we just want Sasha, just a quick update, and we're going to go ahead and call it today. I just want to thank Russ for being with us, and tomorrow we'll be talking. Well, actually, I may be out until next week, but we'll be talking about Donald Trump's indictment and conviction, and he'll be on CNN this evening. And really turbulent times out there. But anything about Ukraine before we leave today?
Yes, sure. The fight is still going on. Ukraine is very carefully preparing its assault on Russian positions. It's using a lot of modern weapons like long-range artillery to soften Russian positions. And it's just an amazing thing how the country, many times smaller than Russia, has no nuclear weapons, and even conventional weapons. It didn't have a great deal until U.S. and NATO started to send it. They can withstand against Russia, which was considered second biggest or strongest army in the world. Ukrainians, with their sacrifices, they absolutely destroyed that myth that Russia is second or third or 10th army in the world. And now all the politicians, starting from Trump, who were making a big deal of being friends with Russia, that Putin is a great guy, and all that stuff is gone. History, garbage. The end of story.
There you go. Well, folks, thank you all so much for being with us. We'll be back again tomorrow. From our family to yours, we wish you safely wherever you are in the world or country. And it's an honor for all of us to be here today on World Edition on Pod of Roku TV. Thank you all. Be safe wherever you are.